from the free download.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
that way I can mark it and I can,
Well,
and I
that's
can
good.
spell the typos.
Good. Hey, everybody, we're live. Welcome to our book study group here, hosted by the Lavenia Success Mastermind, brought to you by the members, of which you're seeing here right now. I see there's Catherine and Daisy and Janet and Stuart. My goodness, where's Missy and Lindsay? Oh, here comes Lindsay. We could start now. Lindsay's here. Just wanted to make sure that we had Lindsay in the house. Good to see you all. Sure, we got a few more tuning in any moment. We're on the which habits, or I'm sorry, which habits, guys. I am tired. What a day.
Sincerity, number 7 pillar.
That's right. Sincerity and impartiality.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that. And I did resort to the paper text. I just had it here because my awesome brother Stuart sent me the text. And so I'm reading it. And I did change the link for anyone who still doesn't have a copy of the book. I send out the weekly email, and I changed the link to the Kindle version because that PDF that was going around was just rough. So because we had all kinds of, right, Janet? We were looking up words trying to figure out what this guy was saying. And well, it turns out that's not what he wrote. So we got into the text to verify it. So I don't have any exhibits for you tonight. But I did want to, well, what I was thinking we would do, which might make it interesting. What if I read the first chapter or the first paragraph from the 6th pillar, sincerity, and then we can discuss that. And then we'll do the same thing with the 7th pillar, impartiality. Right?
John,
So I guess we got one.
Starting with 7, sincerity.
Yeah, it's chapter 7, which is the 6th pillar, because chapter 1, there wasn't a pillar. It was just.
You were right.
Right. So, yeah. So why don't we do that? Does that please, if it pleases the group, are you pleased? All right, well, then let's do that then. Human society. All right, this is the 6th pillar, sincerity. Human society is held together by its sincerity. A universal falseness would beget a universal mistrust, which would bring about a universal separation, if not destruction. Life is made sane, wholesome, and happy by our deep-rooted belief in one another. If we did not trust men, we could not transact business with them, could not even associate with them. Shakespeare's Timon shows us the wretched condition of a man who, through his own folly, has lost all faith in the sincerity of human nature. He cuts himself off from the company of all men and finally commits suicide. Emerson has something to the effect that if the trust system were withdrawn from commerce, society would fall to pieces. That system of an indication, I'll start that again. That system being an indication of the universal confidence men place in each other. Business, commonly supposed by the short-sighted and foolish to be all fraud and deception, is based on great trust. A trust that men will meet and fulfill their obligations. Payment is not asked until the goods are delivered. And the fact of the continuance of the system for ages proves that most men do pay their debts and have no wish to avoid such payment. And the first paragraph. What do you guys think about that? Question: would any of you show up at the restaurant and order food and put it in your body if you didn't have a trust? Right? What would work without sincerity in this case? Right? If I went to Apple, I don't know if that's a good example, but if I went to Apple and said, hey, I'll take one of those iPhones, and they sold me, something that doesn't work. And could it stand the test of time? That's what he's saying. The whole damn thing falls apart, right? If we're not basing this on some trustworthiness, which I think is very akin to one of the other pillars we already read, integrity, right? So this is a supporting pillar. It's not one of the 4 main ones. It's on the inside, supporting and beautifying the temple of prosperity. What do you guys think about this? this chapter. There was so much in this. My husband is cooking lasagna and the smoke alarm is going off. Well, Janet, you go ahead and have that experience then. All right, very good. And you see, I trust that you're telling me the truth. It's not just some story that you made up to befuddle me. Anybody have some thoughts on sincerity? Thoughts on sincerity?
Well, just on trustworthiness, which I think is part of this, is that I just want to say I couldn't always have my mic on because the smoke alarm was going on.
Oh, right.
Was that when e-commerce first came into being, and there were stories about people's things coming late, not coming, and do I trust? Do I trust? And this was Amazon. Do I trust? My there, etc. And it continues today with different people to, will I get something that's worthy of my money being spent? Will I get it in time? I've had things sent back to China. I never received them and never received a refund. That's a different company. And so I won't order them. Other things like that. So I think, we're talking about business together, of course, and you've got to be trustworthy. You have to be sincere in what you're saying to people and what you're providing. And if you're not, you're down the tubes pretty quickly.
Sure. Says here, spurious things have no value, whether they be bric-a-brac or men. We are ashamed of imitations that try to pass for the genuine article. Falseness is cheap. The masquerader becomes a byword. He is less than a man. He is a shadow, a spook, a mere mask. Trueness is valuable, right? So like that story, Shakespeare's character there who, sunk into the depths of despair. The interesting thing about this, and he goes on in the chapter to talk about, well, to put it in modern parlance, using, words with less syllables, what you think is what you get. Or how about this? Takes one to know one, right? What did he say in that opening paragraph? So it's the small-minded who perceive or assume that, all business is fraught with fraud and whatever, right? We could see this also here in, because we had a lot of people who are, goal achievers here, and you're looking to create, and you are creating, something bigger, better than what you did before, right? So you're advancing in life, and yet sometimes we've had to extricate ourselves from some of our most cherished beliefs, like, oh, rich people are, and now fill in the blank with whatever accusatory or condemnatory statement. Right? Why would people do that? Why would people cut themselves down or cut others down to like, I guess, boost themselves up? There's a couple of different ways that you could have the tallest building. One is you can level everybody else's buildings. The other way is you can go build a taller one, right? But this whole idea, to bring it into one of the contemporaries of James Allen, Wallace Wattles, to bring it into like what Wattles talked about, is this idea of creation versus competition. Different set of words, okay, but the person who is insincere, I would say, is also the person who is of the competitive mind. We all read, or I think everyone here did, The Science of Getting Rich, right? So the competitive mind, you get more, I get less, there's only so much pie. Would that not lend itself to a tendency towards insincerity, dishonesty? What are the component parts, according to James Allen? The component parts of sincerity: simplicity, attractiveness, penetration, and power. Who's got some thoughts on this? You attractive, powerful, simple-minded people. Stuart.
I got some thoughts.
Yes, please. Well,
Got
the
some
next
thoughts.
simpleton, please come forward.
Yes. Well, I mean, there is some, like, I think about Chauncey the gardener, what was that? Peter Sellers, being there, right? And the simpleton is like the Buddha kind of thing, or this
Right.
concept of just simplicity in nature. He talks about the back to nature movement, and the things that we see as most beautiful, are these simple things. At least the difference between nature and human nature, right? The simplicity in nature we see as beautiful, and yet it tends to get corrupted by the human intellect or whatever.
Well, as a natural, I don't know if you're a naturalist. I know you know a lot about nature and stuff, right?
I would call myself a naturalist.
Right. So I mean, can you improve upon nature? Didn't he say that in the book? It's like, that's it. That's perfection right there. There it is. And I thought about that as he was saying it, Stuart, because I could be hiking through the desert of Arizona. Here I am in the Sonoran Desert, and there's saguaro cactus. Everyone knows saguaro cactus. It's the big cactus with the arms, right? It's in every Western movie. But they're all different shapes. And some have rot on the side, and some have fallen and decay. Here's the saguaro skeleton. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a saguaro skeleton, but it's got these, it's like tubes of wood, it looks like. And is that not also perfect? I guess in the cycle of life and nature, right? I mean, there's people who take a saguaro skeleton and put it in their front lawn. It's kind of like driftwood or something, it's art. Anyway, you were saying, Stuart.
No, I agree. I think that, to equate those two words, perfection and simplicity, right? It may seem like a stretch, but when you really think about it, right, there's a simplicity and perfection. You look at a cloud, or you look at a mountain range, or you look at a flower, and on the one hand, it could be very complex, and on the other hand, it's simple and perfect in and of itself. I like where he gets into this concept of sincerity and trust and commerce, and I'm glad you read that the first opening there. And I don't know if you covered this, but if we didn't trust each other, we couldn't transact business with each other, right? And I remember being a young man and a struggling entrepreneur in my early 20s, and the concept of 30 days out or 60 days out, or just even the concept that somebody would bill you for something that you were going to order, and the level of trust involved in that. And, I was more just kind of naive and bright-eyed, and, I don't think I had a credit card till I was in my 30s, right? So I didn't have credit or anything like that. And even just the concept of somebody, you make a phone call and somebody, you can order something and they're going to send it to you, and they don't even want to be paid for 2 months. That just blew my mind, right? So yeah, this really kind of hit home with this concept of trust, right? And then he talks about the jaundiced eye, right? And that it's easy for the insincere to imagine that everyone is like them, kind of like the previous chapter about integrity and honesty, and that it's, the dishonest person assumes that everybody else is dishonest, and
Right.
will even drop the salesman who kind of acts like, well, you have to do that because that's the way it is. And it tells more about your nature than it does about human nature, right? Because it just means that that's the way you think. Everything is yellow to the jaundiced eye. And he drops some good reminders to look for the good, right? He says, if we can't see the good in human society, then we need to overhaul ourselves, right? And this thing about society is sound at the core and contains the seeds of perfection, but it also may contain the seeds of discord or whatever. But it's how we choose to look at these things. And I think it's easy, especially in today's day and current events and things like that in the state of the world, right, to just look at either human nature or look at the current affairs and just be like, oh, everything's going to shit and people are shitty and this and that, right? And he's really reminding us, we are what we think, right? We attract what we think, all this stuff, and this concept of looking for the good. And I would say this concept of sound at the core with the seeds of perfection could predate laws and rules and regulations and governments and things like that. And that I think there were checks and balances in Neolithic and Paleolithic societies, right? And if you got out of line, if you did something, whatever, then the tribe or the clan would exile you if you did things that people that wasn't acceptable to the group or whatever it was. And so I think long before there were written laws and rules and things like that, we had our own way of kind of weeding out the bad eggs or the bad seeds or whatever that is. In striving to, and this is where he talks about like falseness and fakeness and phoniness. And first of all, he says that falseness is so despicable a vice that we can become a shallow weakling whose mind has no deep well of power from which others can draw. And in striving to appear what we are not, right? This is about putting on airs and pretentiousness, that we lose our individuality and we lose our character, right? And these are, some of the things that is really only yours, right? Is your individuality and your character. It's not something.
Let me ask you something, Stuart, and the group. Does this seem like, and each pillar is different, okay? But did you measure yourself up to this? Like when you were reading this, was this like inventory that you were taking for yourself? And if so, do you feel like by degree you measure up? Is this even attainable? Like is perfection attainable with any of this stuff? Especially the next one, impartiality. I was like, I mean, sure, I've got distinctions and proclivities and discriminating thought and all that. I'd like to think I'm not prejudiced. I'd like to think that I confront reality and attempt to see both sides. But my goodness, the stuff he's talking about here, like you're walking around in a state of constant bliss and serenity or something. Well, I guess I don't got it then. I guess I'm not it. Right. So what do you think, Stuart? Is this like, are we dealing in absolutes here? Because I don't know about absolutes.
It's interesting. I mean, of course, I think any self-aware, self-reflecting person that reads this stuff is going to compare or take stock or take inventory. Am I like this? And to what degree? And I think to a certain degree, sure, there's maybe this level of perfection or unattainable striving, right? And I think there's been several accounts where he actually does kind of say that these things are by degree and we strive to these things and we can evolve into these things. And it's like anything else. It's like, when we kind of keep score of these things for ourselves, you're going to have a higher integrity quotient than you might have a sincerity quotient, or you might have a higher this or that, and all degrees. And maybe we could create the James Allen 8-pillar post scorecard or something,
matrix
like
or something. We could
right. I mean, and maybe some of these things hit us more than others. Obviously the chapter on integrity, right? Of course, I thought of you the whole time I was reading that, and but yeah, all of these, I think it's funny because some for sure are more, I don't want to say important to me, right? But maybe if you had to put a number value of 1 to 8 on these things, right, then you would be forced to kind of say what were the things that are most important to you. And I think that would also just be as telling to our character and our value system, right?
Sure. Well, he's at odds here a little bit with Solomon, at least in my view, right? Because, well, when I think of Solomon, and I don't recall, being there personally, I might have been, but maybe not. But here was a guy who was opulent. He was wise, right? When he had counsel. He also warned of I guess, being gullible, right? Solomon talked about how integrity could be a liability, if you expect everybody to be like you. Okay. Whereas here he's saying sincere people do not think of themselves, of their talent, their genius, their virtue, their beauty. And because they are so unconscious of themselves, they attract all and win their confidence, affection, and esteem. Unconscious? So I'm just, some of the stuff he gave me here, I was like, I don't know if I live up to that exactly, nor do I know that I'm willing to go down that road. Now, I could also say, everyone, he wrote this a long time ago. He should see what Stuart was just talking about. You should take a look at this. Yeah, you want to talk about criminal organizations bereft of principle, but now there's judgment. What did I just hear come out of my mouth? Right? I mean, look, there's two sides to every coin. I mean, I can't just blanket condemn, here's, that. I've got to, there's got to be something right about it, if there's something wrong about it. So, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I like the part when he's going, so he says he perceives a movement, a look, a word, an act, the nature of man, and acts accordingly. So it's not like he's being unconscious. It's not like he's not paying attention. He's on his guard without being suspicious. So you want things to go right, but they can go wrong. So you want to believe in someone, but maybe not. So you're not just like always going, oh my goodness, this person's out to cheat me. This is something else. But you're not surprised when human nature kind of goes, nah. He's prepared for the pretender without being mistrustful. He acts from positive knowledge and not from negative suspicion. So I think these things, kind of talk to the both sides thing. He's not without consciousness of how things can be or do go, but he looks to the better side of it.
Got it. Well, like you were saying there, here's a quote from the subsection on power. It says, power goes with penetration. An understanding of the nature of actions is accompanied with the power to meet and deal with all actions in the right and best way. So sincerity then.
Knowledge is always power, but knowledge of nature of actions is superlative power. That's the next thing.
Right. Right. So then what he's talking about here with sincerity is not just what we're putting out. It's perceiving with sincerity. In other words, it's removing the jaundiced eye, the filtered glasses. It's working with what is, not with what should be, based on my own prejudices. That's being sincere in both flows, inflow and outflow, right? So if I keep looking at the what flower did he talk about? The pansy, and demanding that it's a rose, or disappointed that it's not a rose, or trying to convince myself with some new age wackiness that it's a rose, I'm not confronting reality. I'm insincere. And I lose. The pansy doesn't, I'm just doing the pansy thing, right? So the nature, the simplicity that Stuart was talking about, right? There it is. Now, what do you want to talk about, right? So with that simplicity and that the power, it seems, while it's a component part of the pillar of sincerity, it seems like it's actually a product of it. It's a product of it. It's not something, let me put power into being sincere. It's let me experience power via my sincerity, my lack of filters in both directions. That's it. Pass the collection basket, guys. Salvation's upon us.
Speaking of the collection basket, did you like the ring true analogy? I thought that was very cool, and I looked it up, and it absolutely is the origin of that term, where you would take a coin in the old days and you would throw it against a rock, and you would listen to the sound, right? And you would know if it was true or if it had base metals or false, right? And so
Didn't they bite him too?
you always see that. You
Still
always see
cartoons,
that.
the
I don't
kid
know.
would bite the nickel to see if it made a mark. I guess silver is softer than
Silver, gold, right? You could probably bend it or something like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. But I like he says, we know the false ring from the true, but we don't know how we know, right? And then he gets into the outer ear can detect the distinction in sounds, but the inner ear, and of course, we know that physiologically, anatomically, there's an outer ear and an inner ear, but I don't think that's what he's talking about. He's talking about the spiritual ear, right? The inner ear can detect a distinction in souls, right? And in our hearts is a tribunal whose judgments do not miscarry, right? And this whether it's your gut feeling or our internal GPS or moral compass or whatever that kind of thing is, that we have this inherent innate ability to see what's true and what's not if we really are looking, right? He talks about an inner infallibility that is shown in the collective judgment of humanity in all works, right? That, you can have 1,000 books and, 999 of them are crap. And the one book that is really worthy is the one that everybody picks up, like integrity is everything, right? And he talks about slaying our prophets, right? And there's a couple instances in this book that I thought was really interesting. These two
I thought
chapters.
about Missy with that part. I was thinking about, yeah, go ahead.
No, the slaying of prophets. First of all, he kind of says that kind of, and this is my own interpretation, while that is a tragedy in and of itself, but it also, because he's not using, I don't think he's using one to justify the other, but he says that it becomes a test of their trueness. And again, that's a paraphrase, but he's kind of saying, the ones that get crucified are the real ones, let's say, if you understand what I'm saying, right? And so, and of course, I don't know if any of you guys are Bob Marley fans, but there's one quote in this chapter and another one in the next chapter, right? And in Redemption Song, how long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look, right? You guys probably heard that. Some of you guys, I see Catherine nodding her head. But that's what it made me think of, right? And the slaying of our prophets. But he talks about the counterfeit coin is cast back into the melting pot, right? But the sterling circulates among people and is valued for its worth. Just as the counterfeit word and deed or character is cast back into the void of nothingness or whatever, and that it's the real deal people that last. The sound-hearted man becomes an exemplar. He becomes more than a man, a force of reality, a molding principle. This guy's right on. The hypocrite thinks he can hoodwink the world. And of course, I put it in the chat, but Mom always said, you're only fooling yourself, right? Going back to those kind of conventional, you're only cheating yourself or whatever it is. And then simplicity. No wise person would want to appear other than what we are, right? So just that concept of simplicity, like you should be happy with who you are, not put on airs or false pretenses. He said there's no hypocrisy in nature, only in human nature. Talks about the back to nature movement, which of course I thought of Emerson, who kind of really led that charge in the mid to late 1800s. I know that James Allen, I was actually reading a biography of James Allen earlier today. I'll send you a link. It really just kind of blew me away because it really, it talks about how he really strove to live a simple, righteous kind of life and out in the country, right? He talks about something about a walk in the country, right? That, I can't remember what part of the book it's in. And then there's a guy who wants to write an immortal psalm, right? And just the fact that you even strive for that means you're full of it, right? That you're putting on airs, right? Just the fact that you covet that, I think, is what he was talking about. He said that in order to do that, you have to have 10,000 bitter experiences, failures, conquests, joys, right? That goes back to the sympathy thing, that in order to be really sympathetic with somebody, you have to have real profound experiences, not just, read a book about something. Attractiveness, right? The beauty of natural objects, which in people is personal influence or charisma. And he talks about the pseudo mystics and magnetism, right? And I'm wondering if he's shooting one across the bow at Mesmer.
Oh yeah, he
Some
is.
of those, right?
Oh yeah, he is. Yeah.
And he talks about by occult means, and I think that kind of tells us where he stands on magic and some of those things that people would try to use incantations or whatever to get ahead in the world, right? Or magnetism.
Well, I think he's more pragmatic and scientific, right? He's not, if you want to play with crystals, I guess have fun or whatever. But can you duplicate that? Does that hold water? So yeah.
I'm going to drop through the last couple of these, and then you guys can keep going here. He says, this is what I was saying before, the very desire to be thought of as attractive is in itself a deception, right? There is no substitute for beauty of mind or strength of character. Attractiveness is lost by being coveted. That's what I was saying earlier. Insincere people commit themselves to the hell of self-admiration. He does a lot of like the hell of this and the hell of that, right? He's obviously a religious man. And then penetration, to me, is like the ability to see through all the BS, right? To distinguish the false from the true. And he says, he who is not deceived is not self-deceived. And then, like you were saying, Janet, not being distrustful, but discerning, right? And not looking at everybody with mistrust, but understanding the nature of actions, right? To be able to see through the nonsense, maybe see people's ulterior motives, right? When you have the power of penetration, you can look right through people. Everybody knows this, right? Whether it's, kids or our children who may not be good liars or trying to whatever, and you can kind of see exactly what they want. Or, as you get better at, seeing through the nonsense, you see it in people. And when you get really good, then you can see it through the news and the media, things like that as well. And then I love that quote about that you said, Janet, about understanding the nature of actions, and that knowledge is power, but knowledge of actions is a superlative power. And that stuff is amazing. Anybody else? What you got?
Thank you, Stuart. Any other thoughts on sincerity? We didn't hear, as is tradition, we didn't hear from Missy tonight, but I was thinking of Missy when we read a couple of things, because some of the stuff she talked about a couple of weeks ago with, the whole idea of killing our prophets, right? That sort of thing. So reminded me of the conversation we had. Catherine, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just, this whole time reading this book or reading this chapter reminded me of like some old friends. And he says something at the end of it. The sincere man stamps his character upon all that he does, and also upon all people with whom he comes in contact. He speaks a word in season, and someone is impressed. The influence is communicated to another, and presently some despairing soul, 10,000 miles away, hears it and is restored. I just love that. It brought to mind some old friends that my kids have probably heard more about them, even though they passed away before my kids were born, than even they have of my own family, because they had such an impact on me, because they were sincere, honest individuals. And it just made me think about it. It really is something to strive for. I just love that part of it.
Right. Or to just be, right? So I guess what he was saying, Catherine, in the book there is that, so why strive, right? So be that and occur as that, because that's what you are. No fake it till you make it or anything like this. And then, for posterity, the message will be carried with no effort on your part. So this is almost like an effortless thing. If you're sincere, then it's simple. There's no efforting to be sincere. Is how I took that. So thank you, Catherine. Yeah.
Simplicity is not easy to get to. It's very difficult to be simple.
Do you think?
Yeah, I do. You have to go through all of the other stuff before you can say, nope, you know what? I don't want that. I just want this. I think it is hard. It certainly is in general. So I love, if I can read from this again, he who has rid his heart of all falseness. So that's part of us getting to our simple. It's getting rid of all the stuff that we were taught, that we were brought up with, all of the things that impinge on us. Get rid of all that. That takes a lot of work. Okay. He entertains only that which is true. Well, figuring out what is true is hard work, I think. He's gained the power to distinguish the false from the true in others. He is not deceived who is not self-deceived. To get to the point where we can take off all of that stuff that's been put on us or we've put on us, to get to the core of us, to get to say, yeah, you're not all that, or you are all that, or get rid of all of the things we put on and get to the simplicity of something, I think takes a lot of self reflection and takes a lot of doing. So to get to simplicity, to get to where we can be, that core of sincerity, yeah, I think it takes a long time.
Right. So like we were talking about before, or like I introduced before, is this even something, certainly by degree, but is there like some pinnacle, like perfection with this? And I guess, like when I read an instruction manual, here's how you assemble the thing. Okay, great. Read the instructions and do it exactly as it said in the instructions, and you will get that product. And I want that product. That's why I bought it, right? I want it to be like that. And so that is as absolute in my mind, very black and white, as absolute as you can get, I guess, in life. But with this, it seems like you're saying, Janet, and like Catherine was offering, there is definitely some fire to walk through to get to that. Now, I think all of us have acquired it by degree, right? We've all walked through fire in different areas of life. And there are certain things, I would say, if we take inventory for ourselves, right, where you have achieved a simplicity, a sincerity. There's no pretense. There's no, I'm so desperate to be something that I'm not. I'm done with that. I'm done. And I think that comes with maturity. Janice talking about putting on all these things or having them be put on to you as facades and things that we acquire, character traits and what have you. But I think there's a point in life where we mature, just like with physical stuff. My daughter keeps accumulating more and more and more stuff. I'm at the point where it's like, I want less stuff and top quality. I'll have nice stuff and just less of it. So no, I don't want more stuff, right? So lightening the load, so to speak. That doesn't mean I'm going to go, renounce all worldly possessions and live in a cave, although I suppose that's a possibility. What do you think, Lindsay? You have any caves in Alabama? Maybe I'll see you over there.
Yeah, caves in Alabama.
All right.
Well, I had something else, but
well, let's talk about impartiality. Why don't we do that? Here's the first paragraph. Seventh pillar, impartiality. To get rid of prejudice is a great achievement. Prejudice piles obstacles in a man's way, obstacles to health, success, happiness, and prosperity, so that he is continually running up against imaginary enemies who, when prejudice is removed, are seen to be friends. Life is indeed a sort of obstacle race to the man of prejudice, a race wherein the obstacles cannot be negotiated and the goal is not reached. Whereas to the impartial man, life is a day's walk in a pleasant country with refreshment and rest at the end of the day. And I was like, oh, crap. I'm not there, man. I'm not there. Now, I'm not all the way over there either. I'm somewhere in there. Okay. But like a day's walk in a pleasant country with refreshment. I don't know, guys. I've been in the heat of battle all day. Not, blood and guts battle, but the doingness of life. And there's some doing to that. What do you guys think of this? Catherine, you got a hot mic? Are you going to talk?
Oh, no, I just hadn't shut mine off. Sorry.
Bob and Missy? Bob and Missy.
I think that our friend, Mr. Allen, is just pointing us to perfection. And I think if you were in this group, you would say, I can't do half this stuff. I'm just showing the way because God gave him the grace and the gift to show us. And like the Missy who showed up here tonight is not a good Missy, but I understand these pillars and we can't stop striving for them. Otherwise, we'll be like those criminals living in capitals all over the Western world. And we must make, the word discriminating has gotten a bad rap because, of course, they've taken the language and bastardized and changed its meanings. We must be discriminating. We must be able to make judgments. We must be able to listen to our instincts if we're walking down the street at night. We must do these things. But as for, we can't think that we're ever going to reach these places. It's just the trying. And he gives us a way to try more than other people. Very different than Neville Goddard. Just sit there and there you are and your tooth doesn't hurt anymore, which is wonderful. But James Allen has a little bit of he paints a very pretty picture. If we could but reach the painting just to even touch it. It's always just out of our grasp, but that's what this realm is for. If we could grasp all these things, there wouldn't be need for another realm. And we just have to keep going. And every time you said the word the other day, switchbacks. I don't even really know what that is on a mountain, but it must be something that switches back or something. You think you're at the top, but we're meant to be stuck on the switchback so we could stop, make a judgment and say, wait a minute, I'm not at the top. But I'm not at the bottom anymore either. So I'm going to switch back right now. I just hope I don't tumble off the side and fall off. Maybe there's a rope connected to Stuart or a llama or something like that that's going to keep me from falling off. But that's just my 2 cents for the day.
Thank you, Missy. And you are a good Missy. It is a good Missy who's showing up here. Stuart could tell you all about switchbacks, just so we're not leaving you in a mystery. So if you look at a topographical map, so here's like the trailhead and here's the summit of a mountain, right? And so you're going up the trail and there's like some steep parts where the trail goes this way and then that way. So you're traversing and you're gaining inclination, you're gaining altitude or elevation, but you're not doing it straight up because you'd be like rock climbing. So you're going this way and that way and that way and that way. And then you can continue up towards the summit. So that's what a switchback is.
Thank
All right,
you.
good. And of course, you don't have those in New York, right? So
No, not on Long Island. No, we don't.
no switchbacks on Long Island, right?
Just detours.
Bob?
We just have detours.
Right.
The one highlight I made in these 2 chapters was in this chapter on impartiality. And we'll get to it sooner or later, but I might as well just lay it on you because once again, right between the eyes, absolute no subtlety about it. Wisdom is the steady grown-up being of whom folly was the crying infant. And, how many times do we find ourselves perplexed, frustrated, and all out of sorts? And our reaction is when in worry or in doubt, run in circles, scream and shout. This is profound common sense, and I think it's rather. I'll let Stuart take the ball from here on this. This seems rather Zen, and I'm out of my element in talking about Zen because I've never made a even superficial study of Zen. But I get the impression that the masters of Zen have reached a level of perhaps impartiality and the ability to take life as it comes that most people do not have. And that is something profoundly to be desired, I believe.
I've had the same feeling while I was reading this, that it was very Buddhist, being more the witness than the participator, just observing, not taking part of, not taking sides, not taking this or that, but just observing. And that's really a lot of how I've gone through this period of time that we're in, is because you can get crazy, get really crazy with it. But I think that, being just observing, you learn a lot, and upset and whatever with it, you are just, you don't have to engage all the time. And one of the things that I've learned is that when you engage, when you not need to be there, you're giving away your power. And that's a really huge thing, to not give, and just to understand that that's a thing is a huge step. And then to be able to observe it in yourself, and to be able to participate in such a way, or not participate in such a way, that you are not just giving it all away, but you are removed a bit, you are calm, and in the discerning moment, then you respond, not react. Those are different. Responding and reacting, very different. So that's just my thought. But I felt, Bob, that I was feeling very Buddhist here. Not that I've studied it either, but just in what little I have been exposed to.
It says here, thank you, Janet. It says here, the impartial man examines, weighs, and considers with freedom from prejudice and from likes and dislikes. So it's not about indifference, and again, it's not about prejudice. So Missy made that, reminded us, right? So there's a difference between discerning or discriminating thought, which is good, right? I mean, observe, look, confront, here's the facts, right? Versus prejudice, which is actually the opposite of discrimination. I won't even let the light in. I know what I know. Where did it say here? Prejudice causes a man to form a conclusion, sometimes without any basis of fact or knowledge, and then refuse to consider anything which does not support that conclusion. And in this way, prejudice is a complete barrier to the attainment of knowledge. I've said to people lots of times, like, the surest way to learn nothing is to think you already know. I've never learned anything by asserting my rightness. So I have to not know and observe. Catherine, were you just moving your cup?
No, actually, I was chuckling to say, we were talking, I think it was last week, and you had asked me if I had read ahead in this book at all, because we were talking about self-control. And this particular line, it jumped out at me. The self-control is better than riches, and calmness is a perpetual benediction.
Mm-hmm.
And I've loved this chapter. I feel like I've highlighted at least half of it.
Wow, that's really rich. What a great quote. Yeah. Anybody else?
What else did you highlight, Catherine?
There was the part about the squalling baby that Bob had referenced earlier. And then as well be irritable with a pansy because it is not a rose, as with a man because he does not see as you see, which John referenced earlier. I love that. He's got a way with words that's just amazing.
Well, I like this chapter too. It reminded me a lot of well, first of all, I don't know, I dropped it in the chat, but right, just like you were saying, John, the concept of making up your mind before you know all the facts, or looking at things from all sides, right, using your perspective. And of course, if we break it down, right, you're prejudging. That's what prejudice is, right? You're making a judgment, or you're forming your opinion before you understand all the different sides of things. The thing that you dropped earlier about prejudice puts obstacles in our way by creating imaginary enemies. And I think in this chapter, he is referencing more about prejudging people, but I would also kind of extend that to events and circumstances and things like that. Because to me, this concept of impartiality reminds me of the Stoic concept of catalepsis, which is comprehension and removing our impressions about a thing, right? It's not the thing itself, it's our feeling about the thing, right? This imaginary enemy, right? Whether it's fear or the thing that leads us to judge a circumstance, but that concept of let the pansy be a pansy, don't freak out because it's not a rose. Right? The pleasant walk in the country. To be impartial is to remove our innate egotism that prevents us from seeing other points of view. Prejudice is a range of mental mountains. So there you go about your switchbacks, Missy. And he flat out says that it's a rare thing to be free from prejudice. It's probably one of the hardest concepts or self attributes probably in this book, right? Because I think that we all tend to have our own impressions about things, and it's hard to be neutral and detached, right? It's probably why it was one of the Buddha's, most important messages about, being detached about events, right? And again, not indifferent, not caring, but to be the ability to use your perspective, to get the 100,000 foot view or the 30,000 foot view of something and see it from all sides. What do you say? The need to be dispassionate, to see all things clearly, weigh the evidence and arrive at the truth, right? Prejudiced people are already convinced that their conclusion or opinion is right or is the truth, and that prejudice is the barrier to the attainment of knowledge or enlightenment. It binds us down into darkness and ignorance. It hampers the development of the mind from its noblest and highest directions. It confines us to the sphere of opinion. Partisans see only a portion of the truth, but think it is the whole. And it's, again, even just his use of the word partisan is truer today than it might have even been, 100 years ago. The impartial thinker sees the whole truth from all sides. And the one wish or sole intention of the impartial thinker is to discover the truth, right? So again, no ulterior motives, not trying to promote an agenda, but just trying to uncover the truth, or just trying to find the truth. I've been reading, James Allen has this great book on meditations for every day of the year, and it might be in that collected work. If not, it's a free download. And a lot of what he talks about is really self-reflection and discovering the truth. And I appreciate that. The impartial thinker looks upon the face of reality. And, you were talking earlier about, can we be that perfect? Is there, is that attainable, right? And he drops the two examples in this chapter. One who walked the earth 1900 years ago, now 2000 years ago, right? And one who was in India, 2,500 years ago, right? And we all know, he's talking about Jesus and Buddha, right? And I think a lot of his works, the teachers that he references most, I want to say are Jesus and the partisan sees in relation to self. The impartial thinker sees things as they are. He talks about becoming a non-combatant in the clashing warfare of our egotistic desires, right? That just hit me like a ton of bricks, man. striving to have a cosmic attitude versus a personal one. Again, that, the 100,000 foot view, or the, galactic view of things, let's say, right? Puts things into perspective. The impartial mind has reached the divine and basks in the light of reality. And then what I thought was interesting in this chapter is 2 of the 4 tenets of impartiality are 2 of the 4 Stoic virtues. So justice is one. He talks about giving and receiving an equal value, and this concept of, in commerce, right? A transaction should be of equal benefit to both parties, and that the person who is just is not looking for a bargain or trying to get one over on the person who's selling it, and is really happy to pay fair price. And that this concept of if one man's loss is another man's gain is unjust, right? It's not this equal exchange in commerce or just in life. Bargaining is not the true spirit of commerce. It implies that one of 2 things are true. One is that the tradesman is dishonest and trying to charge a higher price, or that the buyer is eager to cajole others out of their profits, right? I thought that was powerful.
Yeah, it was. It reminded me too of Napoleon Hill said, I will engage in no transaction that does not benefit all parties involved. And Wallace Wattles, right, with the whole idea of use value, right, which we've covered. Yeah.
Agreed.
And
Yeah.
then it reminds us that bargaining is a cultural thing for some. Yeah, you go to the open air bazaar in Brazil or whatever, and everything's double the price, and of course you're gonna haggle.
You gotta haggle.
Part of the dance. That's the dance that you do.
But I think that what he's saying is that it just encourages us in commerce, right, to charge a fair price, or to be happy to pay something, of for its value, right? He talks about the guy who feels like he overpays for everything, and he paid twice as much as he should have, right? And that's a certain attitude in life where the just person is happy to pay full value for everything. And then he talks about patience is an unswerving considerateness and sweetness of disposition, and a gentle strength under the most trying of circumstances, right? And that if we can learn the lessons of patience, that we can be very prosperous. That our heart should be at peace with people who differ from us. This kind of goes back to the sympathy and compassion chapter, that even if people differ from us on the things we hold most vital, that our heart should still be at peace with these people, right? And again, easy to do.
Yeah.
Easy to say, maybe not easy to do. Here's the other Bob Marley quote. He says, we should avoid quarreling like a deadly poison. And this brings to mind, the lyric from Rastaman Vibration. If you get down and you quarrel every day, you are saying praise to the devil, I say, right? And this concept of bickering and quarreling is, dancing with the dark forces, right? It keeps us in a place of negativity and darkness.
Missy's got to jump in on this. She's got a hand up, and the chat says here, not possible for Italians. So
The hand is mine.
That's his hand.
oh,
Yeah.
We're
I
quarreling.
never know with you two.
Well, just prior to the passage that Stuart read, it's right. It's right as he introduces patience. The irascible man is courting speedy disaster. For who will care to deal with a man who, I think the word is missing in the PDF, continually going off like ground powder when some small spark of complaint or criticism falls upon him. Even his friends will one by one desert him. For who would court the company of a man who rudely assaults him with an impatient and fiery tongue over every little difference or misunderstanding? And of course, the flip side of that is something I was told and took to heart decades ago. And that is, nothing will make a person angrier than a person who won't get angry. Stuart, I love that. Love the reaction, Stuart. It's absolutely true.
It's absolutely true, to the point where it makes people more and more infuriating, and you go from people who may start out at a certain place, and that whole interaction can escalate into every trick in the book just to get a rise out of you, right? Ad hominem attacks, and when you talk about let's say the art of logic or arguing in the true sense, right? Having a Socratic debate or discussion with somebody, and if they're losing the argument on its merits, then immediately, right? Those are those, what is it? The fallacy arguments, right? Well, I don't like what you say. Well, you're ugly or whatever. Like, you immediately go right from the from the merits of the argument to attacking somebody's character, or there's a zillion of these fallacy arguments, but absolutely.
That's great. Ad hominem attacks. Yeah, when you resort to that, you lose. So, Missy, was there something else?
I just wanted to, I don't know what this says about me, but I'm just admitting it to everybody. Maybe somebody on YouTube is as bad as me, but I made a mug. I do a lot of traditional Catholic mugs, pre-Vatican II. And it said, "Forgive your enemies, for they know not what they do." Beautiful mug. But I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not ready to forgive them yet. So St. Paul said, "Forgive your enemies." But then on the back of the mug, I wrote, "Because when you do, it heaps coals of fire upon their head." I have all these flames going up. And like, now I feel better, because hey, St. Paul said it. Because if your enemies maintain that posture against you and you forgive them, that's what a priest says to me in confession. Because I'm like, my neighbor did this and he did that. He goes, you got to forgive him. And when you forgive him, then you heap coals of fire. I'm like, oh, I can work with that. So that's, I'm like, well, I'm not Sicilian.
Thank God.
You better be calm.
All right. There was some innuendo in there, Bob. I heard something. All right. Hey, guys, we're past the top of the hour. We could wrap up with any thoughts on impartiality, and then I thought it might be profound and auspicious to end off with, now that I know it's in here, the James Allen's book of meditations for every day in the year. So I've got February 28th pulled up right now, in case you guys, would you like to do that? That would be cool, right? Any other thoughts on impartiality? We could probably bang on this all night.
All right, I'm going to knock twice on this, once for calmness and once for wisdom, okay? Calmness, I think, Bob, also kind of goes back to what you were saying, the ability to remain calm in the most trying of situations, or even when we're under attack. Calmness is a peaceful haven of the emancipated souls after their long wanderings on the ocean of passion, right? The Humpty Dumpty reference I thought was really cool, because I never really thought of it like that, but he talks about, or implies the self-importance of Humpty Dumpty. And I looked it up, and there's a whole psychological study on the Humpty Dumpty narcissist who's arrogant and sits on the wall thinking they're all that, and then they fall off the wall, and their fragile ego or insecurities is like the shell around them that crumbles. I thought that was very, very cool. And then, in terms of wisdom, first of all, wisdom in Greek is Sophia, right? And if you notice, every other chapter, is very sort of masculine oriented, right? And in this, he talks about, wisdom and her counsels, her wings, she leads us, and things like that. And so, again, I think he's talking to or speaking to the feminine nature of wisdom and what the ancients, called Sophia. I thought that
It's also in Latin, Stuart, it's also feminine, sapientia. It's also feminine, and it actually comes from taste, sapor. Wisdom is the taste. It's the highest form of knowledge, because the old saying, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. You know what it is from the taste.
Oh, when something leaves a bitter taste in your mouth, right? I love it. No, that's great. And again, this is the highest virtue in Stoicism is wisdom, right? And it's, I think, John, I've heard you say knowledge plus experience is wisdom, right? Knowledge without application or experience is just useless, right? And so that's where we get into wisdom. And here's the last thing I'll say. When it has passed through all minds and therefore knows them, and it has traveled with all hearts and knows their journeying in joy and sorrow, and when wisdom touches us, we are lifted up and transfigured, and we become a new being and inhabit a new universe. James Allen, baby.
Ain't no faking that. Good times. Anybody else on impartiality? All right. Well, let's end off with something special. We'll read from James Allen's book of meditations for every day in the year. He took the time to write it, so we're going to read one out of 366, because he included February 29th, which we're not going to be doing because we don't have one this year. So says here, if a man can find no peace within himself, where shall he find it? If he dreads to be alone with himself, what steadfastness shall he find in company? If he can find no joy in communion with his own thoughts, how shall he escape misery in his contact with others? The man who has yet found nothing within himself upon which to stand will nowhere find a place of constant rest. Without is change and decay and insecurity. Within is all surety and blessedness. The soul is sufficient of itself. Where the need is, there is the abundant supply. Your eternal dwelling place is within. Let a man learn to stand alone. Be rich in yourself. Be complete in yourself. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we shall conclude the 8 pillars of prosperity next week. So we're going to read the 8th pillar on self-reliance, which may be a nod to Emerson. And then the final chapter, the Temple of Prosperity. And our next book shall be Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff. So we're shifting gears hard. All right. Speaking of which, I'm looking forward to the Gator Nationals in 2 weeks. I'm going to be in Gainesville. We're going to be watching nitromethane burning insanity. And so talking about shifting gears. Actually, there are no shifting gears in those cars. They're direct drive. Anyway, love you guys. We'll see you next week.